And okay, cool. I thought my presentation had crashed, but it didn't. It has done. Wasn't it ethanol? It was super thick. I wish I'd put more. I wish I had blended more almond milk, but I just didn't. Gosh, Red, that's the worst joke I've ever heard in my life. Stop it. Oh my god. The worst joke. Ethanol said, how many fought the good fight and removed a pickle? I thought I said it on there. What did I say? Jeez. Like 30 something. Yeah. It was like, we made it over 100. Well over 100 pieces of pickle, but still got 79 in the end. So it was like 30 something. Red, wow. Wow. Wow, just ignore him, he'll go away, Kyle. Anyways, guys. For those of you guys who don't know where the cerebellum is, we're not talking about this part, the cerebrum. Okay, don't get this mixed up. Cerebrum and cerebellum are often mixed up. The cerebrum is the normal wrinkly part of the brain that's on the outside. Okay, that's all. That sometimes is confused with cerebellum, which is just this little part down here. It actually goes up underneath the brain here. They're not showing the full thing, but the cerebellum is actually down here. It's kind of back of your head, right at the bottom of your skull. That's that. Okay. So that's where it is. It's down underneath the occipital lobe, right posterior to the brain stem. That's it. It's actually separated from the rest of the cortex, from the rest of the cerebrum, by a fold of the dura mater, which we've talked about before when we talked about protective anatomy of the central nervous system. Recall the dura mater is one of the meninges, one of the 3 protective barriers of the brain. It's the outermost one, the toughest one. And since there is a special fold of the dura mater separating the cerebellum and the cerebrum, the rest of the brain, the other layers of the meninges also go in there with those as well. There's also a separate layer of those also. Yeah, just some interesting stuff. That's where the cerebellum is. We're going to talk more about it. Baguette out of here. Welcome on in, man. What are you doing? How you doing? Welcome on in. What's good? What's new? And what's something you learned today? Good to see you. Red Tacular is getting drunk with power, making bee jokes. I ain't a beta. Got him. Neuropilot, my friend. Good to see you, man. Neuropilot coming in with a random neurofact. Cerebral palsy is usually a hypoxic injury to the cerebellum. Yes, as far as that. Well, yeah, maybe. I don't know much about the etiology of cerebral palsy. So yeah, thank you for teaching me. I didn't know that. I know that there's other things that can happen to the cerebellum due to hypoxia or damage. Hypoxia, which is, for those of you who don't know, a lack of oxygen to a part of the brain, or other things. But yeah, I did not know that, Neuropilot. Thank you for sharing. That's awesome. Had no clue. I thought with the word cerebral, it had more to do with the cerebrum, but maybe not. I'm looking right now. There it is. Cerebral palsy. How did I know we're talking about that? Yeah, okay. It's caused by damage to the brain at or before birth. Okay. That could be the cerebellum. It could also just be the cerebrum. I don't see anything specifically saying it is just the cerebellum, but I mean, it could be something that it could be all over. It could totally happen in the cerebellum too. See, poor coordination, stiff muscles, weak muscles, and tremors. Yeah, that sounds like something that would definitely affect the cerebellum. If I had to guess. Let me see. Where is it at? Signs and symptoms, diagnosis, causes. So 3/4 of the cases are positive. No identifiable cause. It happens during intrauterine development. Fetal growth restriction, hypoxia of the brain. Okay. Yeah. Let's say it could be a lot of different stuff, but I mean, I'm sure that includes the cerebellum too. We're going to talk about something else that happens when you have damage to the cerebellum, and it sounds a lot like that. Also, quest time. For whoever's ready. There's our question of the day as well. What's an interesting physical talent that you have? Please tell me about that. I have a really interesting physical talent that either people love or they hate when I do it. Kyle's talent is gaining weight. I said unusual, dogs. That's not unusual for North Americans. Seriously though, Kyle said he used to be super flexible. Interesting. Got it. Could Tourette's be a talent? I mean, if you want it to be, sure, why not? Wow, Red. Wow, 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 wow. You're drunk with power, sir. I see you guys took out Snoop's heart nose, which means this little fat one gets treat, and y'all get some kitty cam. Thank you guys for donating again to Fat Boy's Fat Belly Fund, dedicated to keeping him the fattest kitty on Twitch. He appreciates it. I appreciate it. You all love it. It's a win-win-win. Time him out. No, I can't. No, I'm not gonna. We're not gonna jokingly do that kind of stuff. We're good. Nope, I can't do it. Can't do it. Unfortunately, ethanol cannot do it either. You're out of bee puns? Good. I'm glad. I hope you stay out. Because that was gonna drive me crazy. Got him. All right. That's where the cerebellum is. Right there. Sorry, he kind of bled over. Just he got to me. Still talking about location and anatomy. So if you look at closely at the cerebellum, it's going to look something like this. Just out of graze. That boy, come back. Don't break my heart. Quit playing games with my heart. You'll see all these lovely little ridges on the outside of the cerebellum. Kind of like there's those these ridges on the outside of the brain, but you see these are much less pronounced, you know? There's larger ridges on the outside of the cerebrum compared to the little ridges on the outside of the cerebellum. Looks like a butt. It kind of does. Yeah, I'm not going to lie. It totally looks like a butt. Yeah. Cerebellum. Got him. Where's butt spot when we need him? But yeah. The ridges on the outside of this, kind of like the ridges of the brain, they are made up of a single piece of neuronal tissue that's just stretched over the entire cerebellum. So this is all one continuous piece of tissue. That's it. There are two lobes of the cerebellum, just like there are two lobes of the brain. So you have a right cerebellum and a left cerebellum. But unlike the brain, instead of there being a big central fissure, which you can't see that there, instead of there being a big central fissure dividing the two halves of the brain, in the cerebellum there is a raised ridge instead. And we call this the vermis. And on average, the cerebellum takes up about 10% of the brain's volume, but contained within it are way more neurons than the rest of the brain, which is interesting. It's because there are some super tiny cells in there, or super tiny neurons in there we're going to talk about later. Okay, let me catch up on chat and we'll move on to the next slide. Neuropilot said actually it's both. Oh, we're talking about cerebral palsy again. The cerebral brain tissue and the cerebellum are involved in a significant number of cases. Makes sense. Just given the symptoms that they had, I was thinking like, yeah, the cerebellum sounds like it would be involved too. But what I was reading was just not saying that. It probably wasn't distinguishing between brain, you know, cerebellum and cerebrum. We usually don't make that distinction. But given what they were saying, difficulty with coordination and stuff, that's kind of the cerebellum's jam. So, makes sense, Neuropilot. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. I would not have thought to. Ethanol said, I finished playing Kingdom Come Deliverance last night, and whoa, why are you pissed? What happened? It's a really good game. Combat's kind of clunky. The ending pissed you off so bad. What happened? Oh no, it felt like the game ended right at the rising action of the story. Oh, well, it sounds like Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 is going to happen. Kingdom Come, what would be after Deliverance? Jeez, I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't know. So whatever's going to be after that. Kingdom Come sequel. Yeah. Kingdom Come Again Deliverance? I don't know. Maybe that's it. That's unfortunate, man. Deliver harder. There you go. Kingdom Come Redeliverance. That's the one. I love it. There it is. That's the one. You listening, makers of Kingdom Come Deliverance? There's your sequel. There's the sequel title. Do it. Basically, threw you in your face is going to be a sequel. It sounds like it, yeah. Yeah. And, I mean, how are you not going to play it now, you know? They got you all pissed off and you want to see the ending. You can't leave it on a cliffhanger like that, right? Neuropilot also shared that Arnold-Chiari malformation can present as cerebral palsy-like symptoms. I did not know this. Thank you. I love it when people add to these conversations. Thank you so much. I love it. Madam Mary says, Kingdom Come, your package cannot be delivered. We'll attempt redelivery at the specified date. That's awesome. The Kingdom Come, we tried to deliver your package, but you weren't home. Please come to your nearest pickup station. Got him. Oh, that's the third one. That's the third one in the trilogy. The Kingdom Come. We can't find your package. Let me talk to my supervisor. Neuropilot said my friend's daughter with autism. Her spina bifida got worse around 5 years old. I don't know. Like difficulty walking, loss of bladder control. Yep. Spina bifida, for you guys that don't know, is when a baby is forming in our bodies. That's why I say our bodies. A woman's body can't form in a man's body. I plan to go over this whole thing eventually, but the baby's body and most importantly the brain and spinal cord. Those kind of start out as as a tube, and then it kind of like curls in on itself and closes up. In spina bifida, usually it's some portion of the spinal cord, usually the lowermost, because that's the part to close up last, doesn't close all the way. So spinal cord tissue doesn't stay in the body like it's supposed to. It'll kind of be outside the body, not connected properly. Often needs surgical intervention, things like that. And yeah. You can see, like, if you have a significant other or even yourself, and there's like a little, like right above your butt crack, if there's like a little, it feels like there's like a little not quite closed part of your back. Like I have this actually. There's like a little indent or something like that. That's kind of the end process of the neural tube, what's called the neural tube, forming during development in your spinal cord and spine being finished all the way. But it doesn't always happen, doesn't always happen. Yep, Krish Ninja, welcome to see you, or welcome on in, good to see you. What's new, what's good, and what's something you learned today? This person says prevent defects and make sure to take folate supplements. That can help a lot, yes. Folate does help prevent a lot of them. It doesn't prevent everything, but taking folic acid during pregnancy is like one of the main things a pregnant woman should be doing. Really, that's why it's really important to know if you're pregnant or not, to make sure you can get enough of those nutrients and stuff like that to prevent those kinds of things. So. I'm glad that after surgery they were able to improve her condition some. Neuropilot, that's good. You stumbled into our stream? Well, welcome in. We're glad to have you. Hey, thanks for connecting. I assume that's you. We are talking about the cerebellum. We got a little sidetracked, which I'm totally fine with. Talking about spina bifida. And I'm okay with that. I'm totally fine with people sharing their experience with these kind of things. So, Neuropilot said she had a malformation that caused a fluid sac-like condition. Increased pressure on her spine. Okay. That kind of caused it to like bust out a little bit. Yeah. No good. No good. Poor little girl. It's unfortunate. Anyways, move on to the next slide here. So that's where the cerebellum is. It's kind of what it looks like. Some different, well, one part of it. We're going to talk about other parts of it right now. So I found this diagram and I made this diagram to denote the 3 lobes. I'm going to change that to lobules, lobe, whatever, of the cerebellum. There's the anterior one, the posterior one, and the flexulonodular one. So here we see colored in yellow the anterior lobe, the posterior lobe, and the flexulonodular lobe. That's a hard word to say. Bearded Dragon, my friend, good to see you, man. What's new, what's good, what's something you learned over the weekend? There he is, starting with a kitty find. I don't believe him. I don't believe this madman. So what this is the cerebellum. If you look at it here, this is how the cerebellum normally looks. It's like all kind of curved underneath the brain and stuff like that. But this is a view, a artist's rendering of the cerebellum flattened out. Like if it were to be unfurled and laid down flat, it would look kind of like this, or at least the outside of it would. It's shaped kind of like a cauliflower, so you can't flatten it out. But if you were to take all the lobes of it and flatten it out, it would look like this. This, as you can see on the side view here, is normally tucked up inside of the cerebellum, and you can't see it like that. So this is a view of it flattened out. This is a view of it, of the cerebellum just cut in half, and I color-coded the same colors so you can see what parts of it correspond to what parts of it. Yeah. So we have the anterior lobe. Here's the anterior lobe of an actual cerebellum, just sliced in half. A sagittal view of the cerebellum. Here's the posterior lobe, by far the largest one. And here it is represented here. And then here is the flexulonodular lobe. The smallest one, just this little bit right here, this little tongue. Doop, that's it. So that's how those kind of correspond to one another back and forth. I had to make this picture myself, actually. They didn't have a good picture of, like, denoting what this was versus how it actually looked in a real brain. So I want to make sure to illustrate that for everybody, so you actually see what it looks like. It's a big part of understanding how this stuff works, is understanding what it looks like, where it is, and all that stuff in relation to other things. Alright, I see Bearded Dragon found a kitty. He wants a long-snouted water dragon-like kitty named oh geez, I'm not gonna try and read that. I can't read that name. But there it is, you added it. I'm getting close to 600 kitties too, if I remember right. 597. I feel like that can happen tonight. If everybody searches in concert, I'm pretty sure we can find the last 3 kitties for tonight. And Random Letters wants to start that quest, but we got about 10 minutes, dog. We'll be there soon, okay? Hope you're doing well, Random Letters. Those are the 3 lobes of the cerebellum. We don't really refer to them much like that the rest of this talk. I'm more importantly going to be grouping the parts of it by function instead. I feel like that's more functional. Got them. So the divisions, we'll be talking about the divisions of the spine of the cerebellum. There's 3 of them. Whoa, hang on. Hold up. First and foremost, we got 41 friends coming over from Anxiety's channel. She was over there interviewing our friend Rocket Sage, who's one of the founders of the Knowledge Fellowship. Anxiety is a wonderful streamer as well, mental health advocate, awesome person in general, a lot of interviews with people. And she came to raid us with her friends, and I appreciate her for that. That girl Bryce, good to see you, welcome on in. Sith Panda, welcome in. Everybody get those fat spirits up in chat if you have them, to welcome everybody into a raid. If you don't have our emotes, throw up your own emotes. Welcome everybody in. Let's get the emote storm in chat. It's okay. Hey Johnny Sweatpants, long time no see. Amethyst Corn, welcome on in. Oh, Anxiety, giving 100 biddies, which means little fat boy gets a wheel spin. Let's do that right now. Let's do it. 100 biddies or a tip of $1 or more kicks off a wheel spin. We see what Fats gets or I get. We'll see what happens. Sometimes he gets something, and I get something. Uncle Bill, welcome on over. Good to see you. Well, we get to do a chomp, which means Fat Boy gets an extra treat, and I get a little finger chomp. Here come the sparks indeed. Why are there 2 of those in emote slots? I don't know, Bearded Dragon. When I was in Anxiety's channel earlier, actually, there were 2 of her emotes too. I think it's just a weird Twitch thing that's going on. There you go, Fat Boy, you ready? Here it is. Oh no. I think he like doesn't want... Ah! I was just about to say, I think he doesn't want to chomp down. Nope, he's good. He got me. He got me. He did indeed get me. But yeah, welcome on in, Radios from Anxiety's channel. Thank you for connecting with us. I appreciate you. Hope you guys were doing well over in Anxiety's stream, learning all about our friend Rocket Sage. I'm gonna get you guys both a shout out. Like I say, go check out Anxiety. She does a lot of mental health advocacy and talks and sharing, and also does a lot of interviews with people talking about their journeys in mental health as well. And also go check out Rocket Sage. She is one of the founding members of of the Knowledge Fellowship, which I am a part of as well. A wonderful community of educational streamers. Sorry, I'm really tired tonight, so words are not coming easily. But she's a founding member of the Knowledge Fellowship. A great place to find out about new educational streamers, things like that. Feel free to go check her out. Words are indeed hard, especially right now when I'm like really tired. I was explaining to everybody that when I'm on vacation, I become kind of nocturnal. That's just my natural circadian rhythm, is to stay up all night and sleep during the day. But I work in schools, and I'm back at work now, and I can't do that. So I had to get up very early this morning, and I didn't want to. And I didn't sleep very well because of that. So this is where I'm at. I'll be fine tomorrow. Just need to adjust my sleep schedule again. Tardy Microbe, welcome on in. Thanks for coming over for that raid. I appreciate that. Thank you guys for being here. So yeah, my name is Ina Beta. We talk about neuromancy and psychology and different science topics here in chat, and we also enjoy some strategy and story-driven gaming. Right now, we are talking about the cerebellum. So my favorite Sarah, actually. And if you guys don't know about that, feel free to stick around and learn with us. We're going to talk all about that. Tomorrow we're talking about balance and how that has a lot to do with the cerebellum as well. So these 2 talks we're doing this week are kind of related. And Thursday, we're going to review the taste of, or the sense of taste. Yeah, any of that sounds like your jam, you know what to do. Also, after this, what are we playing tonight? We're playing some Slay the Spire. That's what we're doing. We do a little bit of neuroscience and some gaming. That's what we do both. We do both of those. Rocket! Thank you so much for that, Sage. I appreciate you. For that spicy host, I appreciate that. It's good to see you. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing with everybody earlier. That was very brave of you. Need to make some food? Hey, no problem. It's all good. I understand. I understand the post-stream, post-interview, like I gotta go do some stuff. I get it. I get that. No worries. Google said, oh, you had the to face the bright evil thing in our sky. I know, I hate it. I don't like it. I don't care for it. I care for the one that comes out at night. I'm okay with that one. But the one that comes out most of the time at night. The one that comes out during the day, every day, I don't like that one as much, especially in summertime. Hey, look who's back. It's a little freeloader. Anyways, thank you guys for coming in again. I appreciate that. Like I said, any of that sounds like your jam, you know what to do. And we're going to continue on with the cerebellum. We were just talking about some gross divisions, function-wise, of the cerebellum. It can be divided grossly into 3 different parts. The cerebrocerebellum, the green portions here, on the outsides of the cerebellum. It can be divided, or sorry, another division is the spinocerebellum here in the center of the cerebellum. And then we have the vestibulocerebellum, which is here at the bottom, which if we looked at the last slide, is just the flexulonodular lobe. It's the same exact thing. So it's just another way to divide up the cerebellum more functionally, based on what areas of the brain map to what parts of the cerebellum and how they interact with those parts. So flexulonodular lobe is really not any different, but the other 2 tracts are much different than the anterior and posterior lobe. Yep. Gerbo, my friend, it's good to see you. How the heck are you, friend? What's new, what's good, and what's something you learned today? Gerbo said, yeah, anterior, posterior, and flexulonodular. That's a word. It is indeed a word. It's a hard one to say, I'm not going to lie. Also, anybody here in chat who wants to join our conversation. What is an interesting physical talent you have? I have something that's either people love to see or they absolutely hate to see. Kind of depends. Either way. So, yeah. I won't do it on stream because I'm worried that it might be against TOS. It's not like super lewd or anything like that, but it does involve something gross I can do with my face. So, yeah. I will definitely not be doing that on stream. Just saying. Put that out there. Okay. Gerba said, you're good. Just got back from the store grabbing some groceries. Glad to hear that. I am very glad to hear that. Gerbo said, the latter, it can sort of neigh. You taught yourself to? That's dope. Alright. Is it cool like that? Hella cool, Madam Berry, yeah. Now Madam Berry is morbidly curious. I could put up a picture in Discord. I can handle that. I could do that because that's not gonna like make it, that's not on Twitch. So I might do that sometime. I don't know. It has something to do with my eyes. But anyways. I might put up a picture in Discord, yeah. Exactly. See, that's what I'm saying, Madam Berry. Either you love it and you're like, what? Or like you don't want anything to do with it. Exactly. So that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. Anyways, the cerebrocerebellum, here are the green portions on the sides, the more lateral portions of the cerebellum. These get input and actually output to different areas of the cerebral cortex, which we're going to talk about in a minute. The spinocerebellum here in the center. That gets input mainly from the spine. We're going to talk about that in a minute. So the vermis actually controls more about with the proximal muscles. The lateral portions have to do more with the lateral portions of our body. I'll talk about that when we get to that specific subsection in a second. And the vestibulocerebellum has a lot to do with the vestibular system, which is for balance, which we're going to be talking more about tomorrow. One of the spinocerebellum. We were just talking about this. But first, I'm going to catch up with chat. Gerba said, today I learned that there are 13 cranial nerves, maybe. For some reason, they're numbered 0 to 12. Why not start with 1? As far as I know, Gerba, there are 12. What's the 13th one? And yeah, as far as I know, there are 12. And one of them actually technically isn't a cranial nerve, but when they discovered it, they labeled it as a cranial nerve and discovered later it's really not, but they're going to leave it that way. Cranial nerve 11, technically not really a cranial nerve, actually a spinal nerve. but they're going to leave it as part of it. So yeah, when I taught this stuff, it was 12. Did they come up with a 13th one I didn't know about? Could be. I would love to know what that is. Also, it's quest time for whoever's ready. Exclamation point quest. You get this little fat guy right here. A treat. Y'all know what to do. You're like, yeah, I'd love to know about that, Gerbo, for sure. It was 13, I got to update what I was talking about, because I've been saying 12, because that's what I learned. And that's what I saw. Anyways, the spinocerebellum, the blue section right here, this division of the cerebellum, right here. And this gets primarily touch and proprioceptive information, so somatosensory information from those touch receptors we talked about or reviewed last week, and proprioceptive input from our proprioceptors in our body, the muscle spindles, the Golgi tendon organs, the joint receptors, those things that tell us where our body is at any point in time. Also gets information from the trigeminal nerve for face sensation, how we feel our face, and also some visual and a little bit of auditory information. It takes in all that information to kind of supplement proprioceptive information about where we are in space at any given time and how we're moving, what direction we're moving, how we're moving, all that stuff. That's all coming in from the body to the spinocerebellum, or on its way into the brain, the rest of the brain, it's also going to the cerebellum, right? So there is, and I can't show it here because I couldn't find a non-copyrighted picture, unfortunately, and my artistic skills are simply, I could barely manage coloring that picture a different color. So I'm not going to be able to draw on here what I would like for you to see, but if you Google real quick, spinocerebellum somatotopic map, or somatotopic map cerebellum, all those words are here on the page if you need to know how to spell those. If you Google that, you'll see what I'm talking about. I can't, like I said, I can't show it to you because the only images I could find were copyrighted ones. But there is a somatotopic map, just like there is on the cerebellum, just like there is in the parietal lobe. Recall last week when we were talking about touch, there is a somatotopic map in the parietal lobe in the primary somatosensory cortex. We talked about the homunculus, that visual image of the way that our brain is mapped to the different parts of our body for sensation, and there's disproportionately large amounts of the parietal lobe mapped to more sensitive parts of our body, namely our hands, our face, our extremities, things like that. Yeah. And there's a similar somatotopic map here in the spinocerebellum as well. It consists of, if you look at the picture I was talking about, there's a little misshapen dude upside down, so his head's down here and his feet are up here, and he's stretched out, he's kind of splayed out this way, so that the more proximal portions, or the more medial portions, are here in the vermis, and the more lateral portions are going to be represented by the more lateral portions of the spinocerebellum. That's up here on this portion of it. Down here on the bottom, there is specifically a picture of like one side of the body here, and then the other side of the body here. So it's kind of the two halves of the body are also represented down here on the lower portion of the spinocerebellum as well. So, oh, I see, Gerbo. They're counting one as the pheromonal response. That goes along with smell. I got it. I see what you're saying. Okay. So yeah, they added in that 0-1. They added in that 0-1, and I saw something about that too. That's debated. We don't really use that part anymore. Like, we still have pheromones, of course. They do affect us, but like, that's kind of a function of the first cranial nerve. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. It's not technically incorrect, but most people say there's 12, and they include the pheromone piece in with cranial nerve 1, the olfactory bulb. Yeah, 0 and 1 are usually together. The pheromone, like smelling of pheromones and the smelling of scents, are done with the same organs, but they kind of affect our brains differently. They're transmitted differently. So some people argue for a division. Some people, most people, I would say no. It's kind of one and the same. So yeah, no worries, Gerbo. I'm happy to do so. It's all good. All good. I'm glad. Thank you for clearing things up for me. I was very confused when you said 13. I was like, what? How did I not hear about this? Yeah, that's all it is. Yep. So again, medial portions of the spinocerebellum are where the more medial portions of your body are going to map onto the somatosensory pieces of that. And then the lateral portions of the spinocerebellum outside the vermis, basically, are where the more proximal somatosensory content is going to map onto through your spinal cord. Thank you for connecting with us. I appreciate you. Thank you. And the outputs from the spinocerebellum include motor cortex, things like that up in the frontal lobe, the deep motor cortices in your brain. That's not a thing, sorry. The deep motor structures in your brain, basal ganglia, things like that. It's going to be projecting to areas like that to help fine-tune your movements. I said love and chat, guys, for the new follow. I appreciate that. Thanks for making this a super friendly place on Twitch, guys. Let's keep continuing on that quest to make this the friendliest place on Twitch. I love it. You guys are awesome. So that's one portion, the spinocerebellum. Next, we have the vestibulocerebellum, which is down here. Again, basically just the same thing as the flocculonodular lobe, named that way for the flocus, not the walk of flocus flame, but the flocus. The nodulus as well makes up the vestibulocerebellum, or the flocculonodular lobe. This is the oldest, evolutionarily speaking, portion of the cerebellum. The cerebellum being one of the oldest, most evolutionary speaking parts of the brain. I don't know if I mentioned this before, but the brain, evolutionarily speaking, kind of developed sort of like a flower. You go up, hey, thanks for connecting with us, appreciate you. If you go up from the spinal column, you get the brainstem, and then that's kind of the oldest part. Then you get the cerebellum and other midbrain structures, and it kind of blooms out into the cortex. The brain kind of developed evolutionarily that way, where it starts at the brainstem, and then sort of there's newer structures as you progress out into the more proximal portions of the brain. So, Mr. Livecraft said, I heard the Waka Flockus is the part of your brain that makes you spend all your money on a jet ski. I freaking love it. Mr. Livecraft, you're gonna fit right in here. Welcome in. What's new? What's good? What's something you learned today? I love that. That was dope. Gerba said, today I learned brains are flowers. Yeah, kind of like that. That's the way I like to think about it, you know? Or like a cauliflower, he has like the inner stalk in the cauliflower, and then it blooms out, and you have that part, you know? Kind of like that. Sort of like that. But anyways, the vestibulocerebellum is one of the older parts, evolutionarily speaking. Which means, I mean, that kind of shows how small mammals' brains used to be, because like that used to be all the cerebellum we got, but then we have all the rest of this part now too. So, because, you know, we're a bit more complex now. I was going the wrong way. So the vestibulocerebellum, that receives vestibular input from the vestibular nuclei, which lie outside of the cerebellum. They're a part of the brainstem. We're going to talk about that more tomorrow. Today we're going to leave it at that. Tomorrow we're going to talk about that more when we talk about balance itself. So yeah, it gets information from the vestibular nuclei mainly, but also a little bit of sensory information as well. And it also feeds right back to the vestibular nuclei. It's kind of its own little closed circuit. And also some motor neurons of the spinal cord as well, and also the brainstem, just to kind of help us to reflexively make sure we're staying balanced, we have the right posture, things like that. Also helps with the vestibulo-ocular movements, or the vestibulo-ocular reflex, which we're going to talk about tomorrow. I'm not going to go into this right now as much as I want to. We're saving this tomorrow for balance, okay? So vestibular cerebellum, it's coming tomorrow. TBD, to be continued. TBC, I guess. Cowabunga! Welcome on in, my friend. I love that when I say, hey, how are you? I'm like letting out an exclamation of joy when you come in. How are you, sir? I'm glad you're here. Is that your pizza emote? I freaking love it. Hell yeah, it is. That's an awesome idea. Cowabunga za. I love it, dude. Got some za on there. It's freaking dope, dude. How are you doing, Cowabunga? Welcome on in. Good to see you. Guys, go check out Cowabunga, please. He is another member of the Knowledge Fellowship. Jeez, words are very hard today. Yep, I haven't had a chance to go check out his stream yet because he streams like at the same time I do. But another, like I said, if they're a member of TKF, they're probably good enough for me. I'm just gonna put that out there. So yeah. Oh my God, Ash was having her first stream today too. My friend Ash the Smurf also coming on over. Appreciate that. Hey, thanks, Mr. Live Clash. Today I learned I got ASMR voice. Ew. I get that a lot though, Mr. Live Crash. Thank you. I hear that I should be doing audiobooks and radio. Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm glad you enjoy it. Ash! Thank you for bringing your friends over, Ash. How the heck was your first stream today? I believe it was your first stream, right? How was it? Tell me all about it, please. I should. Thank you. I hear that, Mr. Life Crash. Yeah, I should definitely look into doing that. I assume it's not too hard to get together a portfolio for that kind of thing. At least audiobooks. I mean, radio, I know you need something for, but I assume that getting something together like a portfolio of work for audiobooks or something like that probably wouldn't be too hard. I don't know. I'll have to look into it. How you doing, Ash? Hope you're doing well. You soft locked yourself in a rando? No! That's a bummer. Well, still, you had your first stream down, first stream get. That's good stuff. Guys, go follow my friend Ash as well, okay? She just started streaming today, I believe. Okay? Go check her out. She was playing some Hollow Knight. She does some Hollow Knight rando runs, I believe. Rando runs? They do those? I think she also does some speed runs. Along with my friend Choco Chip Pancakes. They both do some similar stuff. Go check them out. Please. Okay, it was. Good. But Raiders, who came in. My name is Aina Beta, for those of you guys who don't know me. We talk about neuromancy, psychology, and other scientific topics here on chat. We also share our love of strategy and story-driven games. That's what we do. So yeah, any of that sounds like your jam? Feel free to stop on by again, hit that follow button so you know when we're live. Right now we're talking about the cerebellum, and then we're going to talk about, or then we're going to play some Slay the Spire. Hope that sounds like your jam, because that's what we're doing. Ugh. Tax you. The spicy host as always. I appreciate you, man. Thank you. How you doing today? Hope you and your family are well, man. More brain friends indeed. Indeed. Got too strong to do pogos, not having enough to continue. Oh, sorry to hear that, Ash. I don't know those terms very well, but I'm sure you'll get it next time. I know this. Sounds like you played Hollow Knight way more and way differently than I did. Yep. Probably way better at than I am. Random Letters wants a black and white tabby named Guppy. We got you, Doug. We got you. Well, it's 598. That Peeps emote, isn't it dope? He's got a good one. He's got a good one. Boom. I believe that's I believe that's 599. It's 598. We need two more, Ash. Two more. Sage! How you doing? Good to see you. Welcome on in. What's new? What's good? What's something you learned today? Hope you're doing well. Okay. That's the vestibular cerebellum. Like I said, we're going to talk about that more tomorrow when we talk about balance. I'm not going to go into it over much right now. We will talk about it tomorrow. The cerebellum, the portions of the more lateral portions of the cerebellum. Okay. Those get inputs mainly from almost primarily from the primary motor cortex up in the frontal lobes, and also some information from the parietal lobes. Those getting motor initiation information from the primary motor cortices, and also somatosensory information or sense of touch information from the parietal lobes. That's going to travel along what's called the cortico-pontocerebellar pathway, going from the cortex to an area of the brainstem called the pontine nucleus. Just knowing the name is good enough, honestly. It's just a portion of the brainstem where this information funnels through, and into the cerebellum. So it goes from there to the brainstem to the cerebellum. And it also projects after some processing in the cerebellum via the different special types of neurons that the cerebellum has, which we're going to talk about in a minute. Projects back to the ventrolateral nuclei, or the bottom lateral or outside portions of the thalamus, and then back to the premotor cortices and the frontal lobes. And this is, you might have noticed, it's kind of a feedback loop. It gets information from the same areas and projects back to the same areas. And that's to kind of what helps us to make our movements nice and smooth when we're moving them. If we didn't have something like this, people with damage to this kind of thing will often have very halting, like jerky motions as they go to reach for something. It's called an intention tremor. They might kind of if they go to reach for an object, they might overshoot it and knock it over. They might undershoot it and not quite get their hand to the object they're trying to pick up. Lots of different stuff like that. This connection between the cerebellum and the cerebrum makes it so that we have those nice fluid motions. We can reach out, grab something, and bring it back in a controlled manner, where we're able to write legibly for the most part. That feedback there is what helps us to do that. So, yes, we catch up on chat. Sage said, I learned that I can last more than 1 year and 1 season in RimWorld. Hell yeah. That's awesome. What was I gonna say? Hoorah for success. That's what I'm going to say. There we go. Feel like you're in school again? Nice. That's awesome. Feel free to, as always, anybody in chat, feel free to add. Mr. Labcraft says, is that the human equivalent to PID tuning? I don't know what PID tuning is. If you want to explain that to me, I can say whether or not I think it is. I don't know. Cerebellum almost recursive recursion? I don't know what that is either. Oh no. I'm like really good at like biology and like medicine and neuroscience, but like other stuff, I find that I'm like woefully inept at sometimes. I don't know all things science, unfortunately. I'm very, very much focused on the universe within. Sage says, isn't that also sometimes a thing with the basal ganglia deficiencies and issues with braking? I think so. I think with that's more something that's you're gonna have not intention tremors, but you're gonna have tremor at rest. That's more like Parkinson's stuff, isn't it? Where like you'll go to move, but you can't, and then you go. Could be, but I mean you could be right about that. I don't know a ton about the basal ganglia, but I think it's more like that. Could be wrong though. It could also be completely very, very similar. So that's not honey poo, you're eating recursion. What? Resting tremors is Parkinson's. Yeah, it's also okay. Also issues with basal ganglia. Okay, so yeah, it sounds like that's more midbrain stuff, is where you get the tremor at rest and the difficulty with initiating motion. Damage here is going to be more. You can initiate just fine, but you can't control it when you start it. You know, you'll get an intention tremor where you're going to move and your hands shaking and stuff on the way, but not so much difficulty with starting that motion like you would see in the Parkinson's. Yeah, I think they're separate, Sage. I think so. I guess I could be wrong about that though. I don't know. I don't know a ton about the basal ganglia as much as I know about other stuff. Still learning. As much as I know about the brain, there's always more to learn. You know, any person that says that they know everything about a subject probably doesn't. So, recursive, says Gerbo, characterized by recurrence or repetition. Got it. Okay. Oh, okay. Those are kind of like the same kind of things than recursive recursion. Okay, got it. I think they're separate things. Gotcha, Neuro. Yeah, I think so too. I think so. Yeah. And there's our question of the day. What is an interesting physical talent you have? Interesting physical talent. What you got? Onto the microanatomy, or basically what kind of neurons we got up in here. What kind? Normally we've just been talking about neurons. Neurons are neurons are neurons, but in the cerebellum there's actually like a lot of different distinct types of neurons. And we're going to talk about what some of those are. Okay. So the major inputs of the cerebellum, those pathways coming into the spinocerebellum from the spinal cord, coming into the cerebellum from, gosh, I'm gonna just get tongue-tied on saying cerebrum and cerebellum like all night. It's just gonna happen. So I apologize in advance. Anyways, those inputs coming in from the cerebrum to the cerebellum to the cerebrocerebellum. Ooh, these tongue twisters, though. Those are termed mossy fibers. When the axons that terminate in the cerebellum and synapse with the specific neurons, or the neurons specific to the cerebellum, those are termed mossy fibers because of the way that their axon terminals look. When we've been seeing axon terminals, we've been looking at, if we've been seeing depictions of a close-up of one synapse, we've only seen one synapse, which makes it seem like each neuron only has one terminal button or one axon terminal, and it connects to one dendritic spike, but really they have a lot of different axon terminals. They have like a ton of them, and the ones projecting into the cerebellum in particular have a ton. They say mossy fibers because think about like what if you look at a close-up of moss, there's all those little spiky tendrils coming off. There's like a bunch of them. They're very, very diffuse, and the axon terminals of neurons projecting into the cerebellum and synapsing with the different types of neurons within the cerebellum. Those have very, very diffuse and types. Those have very, very diffuse axon terminals as well. They're very, very bushy, if you will say. So that's why. So those mossy fibers are the ones coming in, and you can see here this is kind of a circuit diagram of here's the input of mossy fibers, and they connect with two different areas. They connect one to what are called granule cells. Now, I remember earlier we talked about how the cerebellum is about 10% of the volume of the brain, but it by far has the most neurons in any part of the brain. That's because of these little granule cells. These are super tiny neurons, and there's a bunch of them all throughout the cerebellum. So mossy fibers coming in, one of the major inputs they have are the granule cells. Those granule cells, like again, as I said, the smallest neurons in the human brain. Those project further into the cerebellum, and then they split off in a T shape. Their axons split off in a T shape and go for about 3 millimeters, which doesn't seem like it's very long. But let's see, how was I thinking about this earlier? So millimeters are to neurons as like 10 miles are to us. Like that's a very, very long way for a neuronal axon to project. Like it's a very, very long way. It's nothing like, you know, going from your foot to your head, like some of these somatosensory axons would do for in your feet. But still, it's a very long way for a neuronal axon to project, especially these tiny, tiny neurons. Peace out, Cowabunga. I'm gonna catch up with chat in just a minute, guys. Just want to finish this slide. Yeah, those split off into those T splits. Those are called parallel fibers because they kind of all run parallel to one another. And these are primarily excitatory, so these are going to send off a specific neurotransmitter called glutamate that's going to ramp up action around them. That's the one major type of cell that they have. So mossy fibers will connect with those. They'll also connect, as you can see here on this little schematic, they'll connect with something called deep cerebellar nuclei, which we're going to talk more about in a minute. Okay, that's another, they'll have the direct connections there. So Purkinje cells are another major type of cell of neuron in the cerebellum. That's denoted here by this large globule that's called, it says PC. Okay, it's the most distinct type of neuron. If you look here, little soma, one little axon here, giant bunch of dendrites, huge, like it looks like a tree, giant branching dendrites. You can receive a lot of input from a lot of different neurons. And the Purkinje cells, also the granule cells, there's a concept of what's the word I'm looking for? Consolidation. Not consolidation. I don't want to use that word because we talked about that with memory. But consolidation is a good word for it because it's taking a lot of diffuse input from your body, from the cerebrum, from the spinal cord as well, and it's kind of condensing it. That's what I'm looking for. Condensing it down into a smaller number of signals. So the Purkinje cells are going to receive a lot of input from a diffuse amount of neurons and types of neurons, and it's going to diffuse that, or kind of condense that down into one signal. It might be, these will receive input from up to 200,000 other neurons, and then condense that down into one signal. There's a lot of signal consolidation going on there. Yeah? And these are primarily inhibitory signals. They're going to inhibit the action of the deep cerebellar nuclei, which we're going to talk about in a minute. Let me catch up on chat though. Thank you guys for waiting. I want to try to get through a slide at a time and then catch up on chat just to keep things moving forward. So let's see. Sage is very super flexible due to collagen stuff happening with your joints and ligaments. Oh, interesting. Kyle was saying he's super flexible as well, or at least was. Random layers got nothing. That's okay. No worries. Ash said, the physical talent, I can fall upstairs. All right. Most of that stuff, I can flex his brain power, not super physically talented. That's okay, me too. It's all good. Absolutely, neuropilot, for sure. Yep. It's true. You gotta know those terms. Axon terminals, the Axon's public transit network. I love it. Yeah, Gerber, yep, 1 millimeter for us is about 10 miles to a neuron. Something like that. Yeah, they're very, very small for sure. Also, it's quest time. Purkinje cells, if a multiple choice question, pick it. Probably. Yeah, they are very distinct. They connect with a lot of cells. They do a lot of stuff. Yep, for sure. Sounds about right. Sounds about right. I see you guys took out Django Binto, which means this little fat boy over here, waiting so patiently. He's got a little attitude arm going on right here. He gets a treat. Y'all get some kitty cam. Thank you guys for donating again to Fat Boy's Fat Belly Fund, dedicated to keeping him the fattest kitty on Twitch. He appreciates it. I appreciate it. You all love it. It's a win-win-win. Oh, my good boy. And then, someone leaving? Is Gerber or Sage leaving? They're both saying bye to each other. I feel like one of you, I don't know. I hope if one of you guys is leaving, have a good night. But I don't know if that's true. I hope you don't. Neuro says that's killing me. When my friend works on artificial neuron network chips, they are going to 3D architectures. Yeah, see, that's what I thought. I feel like you guys are saying bye to each other, but you're not actually leaving. It's all good. It happens sometimes. No worries. It's the nature of typing, nature of text-based communication. They're going to 3D architectures in the physical silicon with many more inputs and outputs to a cell than conventional logical architecture. And I think that's part of the strength of our brain, is that there's just so many connections, you know? Allows for more potential circuits, things like that. It's all good, guys. We figured it out. Random Life says, actual physical talent. I am physically incapable of navigating public transportation. Oh no! Like you can't get on the trains or what? I think that's what it was too, Cowabunga. And peace out, man. It's good seeing you as always. Thanks for hanging out. Alright. So more microanatomy. We're keeping up our circuit chart of the different connections in the brain. But now we're going to talk about those. So what are more profuse inhibitory inputs, or more specific inhibitory inputs? There's cells that work specifically to inhibit the granule cells, called Golgi cells. You might notice that this word Golgi comes up a couple times. We talked about it in proprioception. This is Golgi tendon bodies. There's Golgi cells here as well. Golgi was an Italian neuroscientist and kind of a badass. Kind of like the same with Santiago Ramon y Cajal. Also, the couple of badasses in neuroscience. Some of the first people to do a lot of the research and in neuroanatomy and physiology and stuff like that. So when you do things like that, you get stuff named after you. So yeah, the person that named everything after themselves. Yeah, well, like I said, when you're the first to discover a lot of stuff, you get to name your stuff. You get to name stuff after you, or you get to have things named after you. So yeah, the other guy, Santiago Ramon y Cajal, also has something named after him. I forget what. At least one thing. I think they were trying to have a race and see who could have more things named after themselves. As far as I know, Golgi is winning. So. Alright, so those inhibit the action of the granule cells, so those will slow down the firing of a granule cell. There's basket cells that specifically inhibit the inhibitory action of Purkinje cells. There are stellate cells which also connect to the dendrites of a Purkinje cell versus the soma of the Purkinje cell, and slow down its action even further. And those are some of those things. Those are some other types of cells that just provide some inhibitory action in there. So all of the, and within the cerebellum is, again, gray matter and white matter, just like there is in the rest of the brain. And it's set up, it looks a little bit different here in the cerebellum. It looks kind of like a tree, right? So all the gray matter on the outside, these are again those neuron cell bodies, the granule cells, Purkinje cells, things like that. And the axons of those things will project down into and connect with the deep nuclei here in the center in a kind of a branching tree-like pattern called the arbor vitae, or arbor vitae, however you want to freaking say it. Okay? So that's just a specific name for that branching pattern in there. Something interesting. And then those are going to project to, many of these are going to project to the deep cerebellar nuclei, like we can see here. Purkinje cells will connect there. Mossy fibers will connect directly to the deep cerebellar nuclei. This boy over here we're not going to talk about just yet. We'll come back to that. This will also connect to deep cerebellar nuclei and the Purkinje cells. But the deep cerebellar nuclei, there are three different types. There are four different structures, three different types. One of them is paired. There's the dentate nucleus. That's the chief output of the cerebrocerebellum. That's the largest nucleus as well. There's the fastigial nucleus also, and the paired interposed nuclei as well. So those are the three different types of deep cerebellar nuclei. It's the teeth, got them. The teeth nucleus. There it is. Let's see. Let me catch up on chat now that we are finished with this slide. Joe Bear, my friend, welcome on, man. You're all stimulatory? I'd say so. People get stimulated when Joe's around. I'm just saying. It's crazy how much is inhibitory versus stimulatory. It is, yeah. I'm gonna talk a little bit more about that when we get to the part we didn't talk about yet. Right there. We'll talk about that in a second. Lewd indeed. Got them lewds though. Send lewds. Actually don't. Alright. So the peduncles, besides sounding really weird and kind of creepy, these are other ways for things to project into the cerebellum. Okay. There's a superior peduncle, which is the highest up of them. This is the best picture I could find of them, unfortunately. Gray did a lot of this. a lot of these anatomical pictures, which is great for me because they're all public domain, so I can just use them without any difficulty. But they are named based on where they insert into the brainstem. So the superior peduncle inserts highest of them into the brainstem. The middle peduncle or medial peduncle goes into the middle of the three types of them, and the inferior peduncle goes in lowest of all of them. That's it. Oh, thanks, Sage. I would appreciate that. I will think about that in the future. Anyways, the deep nuclei, they both project through and also receive input from these peduncles. So these are both afferent and efferent with respect to the cerebellum. They either travel out of the cerebellum and into the brain, or they'll get input from the brain and spinal cord and whatnot and go into the cerebellum. They can be both. The superior one is almost completely efferent. That's the major highway out from the dentate nucleus to the cerebrum, and that's going to help complete that cerebrocerebellar, the corticopontine cerebellar loop we talked about earlier. Peduncles are important, indeed they are. There's the middle peduncle, or middle. Saying cerebellar peduncle is kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Redundant. There we go. But there's the middle peduncle. That is mainly afferent, but is also some efferent as well. So it's mainly going to get signals in from the rest of the body. It gets signals from the cerebrum, the pontine nuclei, and also goes throughout the cerebellum. So kind of the same inputs, that's the other end of that cerebropontine cerebellar tract. So this the dentate nucleus, and out the superior peduncle is going to be the outward path for that, and the inward path for that is going to be the middle peduncle. And the inferior peduncle is mainly has to do with the flexulonodular lobe, the vestibulocerebellum, and the vestibular nuclei. It's going to be be afferent and efferent. It's going to have a mix of input and output, and it's going to serve its own little closed circuit for the vestibular system. And we'll talk about that more tomorrow. Yep. Let me catch up on chat now. Looks like leaves? Yeah, exactly. Carbuncles, on the other hand, yeah, nobody wants those. Gross. No, thank you. Let's pronounce it peduncly. I've heard peduncle. I don't know. I didn't see an IPA pronunciation for it. So without those, I don't know. I tend to gravitate towards the IPA pronunciations because I can read them easily. If I don't see one, I kind of go with how I hear it. I heard other people saying peduncle or peduncle. I don't like peduncle. I go with peduncle. Kind of the same thing. Oh, you meant to use it. Oh, okay, I got you. Yeah, I don't know. I like peduncle better, or peduncle better. I don't freaking know. It's tomato, tomato. It doesn't matter, honestly. I feel like we're learning about an alien world. I know, right, Gerbo? The pedonkadonk. That's the new name I have for it. Gerbo. I love it. You rock my socks on the daily. Yep, we'll learn about a lot of alien-sounding things when we're learning about the universe within. Indeed. The freaking pedonkadonk, dude. There it is. The cerebellum looks like trees. Yeah, it kind of does. That's where you get that term arbor vitae. That's the one we were talking about that earlier. Other people thought it looked like trees too. That's why they named it as such. Alright, so motor learning and the inferior olivary complex, that little green boy down here we didn't talk about earlier. We're going to talk about it now, okay? So the olivary complex, if you recall back to our auditory talk, or talk about the auditory system, we talked about the superior olivary complex. That had to do with hearing. Well, now we're talking about the inferior olivary complex, or the bottom portion of the olive, noted here, kind of on the side of the pons. You can kind of see it here too. This will be the olive. Superior olive is going to be up here, of course. Inferior olive is going to be below that, so down here. So that's where the olive is. The olivary complex is going to be located in there. Inferior olivary complex, or the bottom portion of it's what we're talking about. This is the pons and part of the brainstem. You can see here the beginning of the brainstem, ready to file out into your spinal cord. It's got that little butterfly of gray matter in the center, which we talked about before when we were talking about the somatosensory cortex. The somatosensory system, not just the cortex. So yeah, there's the... My mouse keeps disappearing. There's the olive. of the superior and inferior olive. And if we were to kind of slice open the pons and look at it butterflied, we would see it look like this. And here is the inferior olivary nucleus inside of there as well. Inferior olivary nucleus, inferior olivary complex, same thing, different names. They do. You might be noticing a pattern. They do that a lot, especially in neuroscience, it seems like. They're the same structure. So you can see that butterflied here, but that's about where it is. And it's going to, this specific brain bit is located, or is, well, I showed you where it's located, but it is involved a lot in motor learning. Okay, so that muscle memory, that learning of motor movements, that's what this is. That's what this is for. Okay, this gets inputs from the cerebrum and the spinal cord along with the cerebellum, and it projects special fibers. You can kind of see it here a little bit, but it doesn't do it justice. It's projecting what are called climbing fibers up to synapse with the Purkinje cells. Okay. But they don't just go up and synapse with them like once, like it's showing here on this circuit diagram. It actually, this climbing fibers actually go and they wind around the dendrites of the Purkinje cells. They actually wrap around them. If you Google this, you can see good pictures. I couldn't find any that weren't like copyrighted and stuff like that. Would have been a hassle to use. So yeah, if you Google them, you can look at that. If you look at climbing fibers and Purkinje cells, if you Google that, you'll see a good picture of it. But they actually, like I said, they wrap around the dendrites or the incoming projections of the Purkinje cells, so they'll synapse with them very strongly. They're not going to synapse with them just one time, the same cell one time. They're going to synapse with that same cell a bunch of times because their axon and all the axon terminals are actually wrapping around the dendrites and probably thus connecting with a lot of different dendritic spines of those Purkinje cells. Ooh, I feel like I'm speaking another language. It's dope. Griff thingy, my friend. Thank you so much, man. I appreciate you. So, what was I going to say? Oh yeah. So these, we were saying there's a lot of inhibitory stuff. There is. And this is another thing. This is an excitatory type of neuron. It's going to have an excitatory effect, so it's going to make the Purkinje cells inhibit the deep cerebellar nuclei less. Thank you, Griff Thingy. I appreciate you, man. Right back at you. And there's a hypothesis that goes along with this for motor learning that says when you're performing some sort of motor action, you aren't so much learning that by strengthening the good things that you're doing, by doing more of those good things. The way that they hypothesize this learning actually takes place is it's not so much that you're strengthening connections between on the circuitry that is causing you to do the good portions of the action. It's more that you are inhibiting, or kind of you're inhibiting the bad portions of the action, or the non-functional portions of the action. So it's not so much you're doing the good stuff better. You're actively pruning away the less efficient and non-essential portions of a movement in order to become better at it, right? So that's why these kind of cells that are specific to motor learning are synapsing with these Purkinje cells, which are primarily inhibitory. They're going to kind of shut down less important parts of an action so that you become more efficient and more focused with it and more easily able to perform it. It becomes more reflexive. It becomes more natural. All those good things, right? That's one theory. There's another theory that's almost the exact opposite of that, but I choose the first theory. I mean, I think the first theory sounds more credible or more logical, I guess, to me, because it's all about that. It's all about that inhibitory input, you know. Peace out, Griff Thingy. We'll see you next time, man. Thank you for coming by. Thank you for dropping the spicy host. Wish I could see you more, but no worries, man. Get that sleep, okay? All right. So I like to. There's nothing that I really saw that says that this is the case. But I like to think of the inferior olivary complex as kind of like the hippocampus, but for muscle memory. In that, the hippocampus, I recall in our talk about the hippocampus and memory, the hippocampus kind of drives that process of long-term potentiation and consolidation during REM sleep and causes us to have those stronger episodic memories, right? The inferior olivary complex is what causes us to have those stronger muscle memories and to refine our motor movements, to give us that motor learning ability, right? So I like to think that they're similar in structure and that they can both be thought of that way. That's just me saying that. That's beta talking neuro. That's not written anywhere, but that's how I like to think of it. That's how I like to conceptualize it. I didn't see anything that said if you have a damage to the inferior olivary complex, that you can no longer learn motor movements. And there's some reasons for that. I'll talk about that in a second. I'll talk about that right now, actually. Remember we talked about patient HM who had damage to his hippocampus. He couldn't form new memories. Right? That's kind of the only damage he had. That's kind of the only deficit he had. He couldn't form new memories. If you have damage to the inferior olivary complex, you're probably going to have other problems too, because that's in the brainstem, dog. There's a lot of really important stuff that goes on there. Basic motor movements, heartbeat, breathing, a lot of life-sustaining functions. Like the brainstem isn't something that you get damage to and then you walk away basically unscathed. No. So I would say that if you have damage to the inferior olivary complex, you're probably going to have damage to other areas as well. And it's going to be a whole slew of damage to you, a big impact on your quality of life. So I don't think that you can say that specifically, that if you have damage to this, you just can't learn motor movements anymore. You're going to have a lot more profuse damage. Compared to, like I said, patient HM, who had his hippocampi damaged bilaterally on purpose to get rid of his epilepsy, which worked, thankfully, but could no longer form new memories. That's all he had going on. Otherwise, he was pretty much, his quality of life was unimpacted, besides the fact that he could no longer form new memories. But this would be different, and I can't say that they're the same that way. But like I said, as far as function goes, I like to think that they are similar. Just to kind of conceptualize it for myself, and feel free to use that. Just know that that's not written in a textbook somewhere. Krish Ninja said, does this mean a new synaptic connection to motor neurons? I'm gonna need some more context. Does what mean that? Like when we learn a new motor movement? I would say I'm gonna answer as if that's what you meant, and feel free to correct me. No, I would say, Krish Ninja, no, it doesn't mean that. It means that there's going to be a changing of the connections between motor and somatic neurons, things like that. There's going to be a change in how things are wired, not so much that there could be some new connections, sure. There's also going to be what's called long-term depression and a breaking of connections as well. There'll be new synapses formed and destroyed as well. So yes, that's a yes. There could be new synaptic connections. There could be less synaptic connections. There could be synaptic pruning. Yes. Sorry, I thought when I read that you were saying, is there new neuron growth? No, I don't think so. Yeah. So yeah, there will be new synapses formed and destroyed during motor learning, just like any other learning. That's what learning is, really. The forming of different neural circuits by the formation and destruction of synapses, in terms called or in processes called long-term potentiation and long-term depression, respectively. Yep. Good question. Thank you for asking. Damage. Gosh, damage and disorders. We talked earlier, Neuropilot was talking earlier about how damage to, there's a disorder called cerebral palsy that can cause difficulty with coordination and things like that. And it can involve damage to not only the cortex, but the cerebellum. It's basically your brain being damaged before birth due to anoxia or other things like that. So there can be just profuse time damage. It's going to depend on where you have damage at. And damage to the cerebellum is going to produce a lot of the same kind of difficulties with this other disorder, which is a more acquired disorder called ataxia. If you have damage due to anoxia or physical damage, something like that, to the cerebellum, it can cause ataxia, which is kind of a whole slew of different difficulties depending on where in the cerebellum it's damaged and how profuse that damage is. It can affect your balance and gait. It can affect the accuracy of your movements. It can affect the muscle tone of your muscles, smoothness of your movements, things like that. We talked earlier about how people with cerebellar damage might go to reach for an object and they might shoot too far and knock it over or reach past it or something like that because their movements just aren't as accurate anymore. That's not something you normally have to think about. You just reach out and grab it. With damage to the cerebellum, you really have to watch and make sure it's getting there and then bring that object back. Or you can undershoot it and not quite make it there in one movement, things like that. You may also go to reach for something and your hand will be shaking while you go do it, because especially the cerebrocerebellar tract, the one that feeds from the cerebellum to the frontal lobes and back again. If that's damaged, that can have those intention tremors or the hand shaking when you go to pick something up. That can happen. Because again, that circuit is there to make sure that we have nice, smooth, controlled movements. By updating your frontal lobes and the cerebellum constantly as you're moving with your current body position, your current velocity, and current trajectory. If that feedback loop is interrupted, then your brain no longer has that information to make that informed decision with, and you end up with a lot of shaking along the way because your brain just doesn't know how to hold your hand still anymore, you know? And again, that's a completely automatic process normally, but damage really throws that off. Gerba says they can still perceive distance, but their body isn't listening. Well, their body's trying to listen. Their body doesn't have that information anymore, Yeah. Your grandpa had hand tremors, but not bad enough to inhibit him. And that's going to happen a little bit as you get older. The cerebellum atrophies just like the rest of the brain, which is where dementia comes from. So you end up with people that will have a little tremor, and that might be due to cerebellar atrophy. It could also be due to muscle weakness. There's a lot going on that could cause that in older people. But yeah, I mean, if he's not like reaching out and like shaking like crazy while he's doing it to the point where he has trouble getting what he's trying to get, probably not a big deal. It's just normal atrophy and stuff like that. Atrophy of both the brain and the muscles. It happens with older people. Damage to the flexulonodular lobe or the vestibulocerebellum is going to equal difficulty with balance. We'll talk about that more tomorrow when we talk about the vestibular system. We can kind of see a woman here. It's a depiction of a woman trying to walk when she has cerebellar damage, and she's got to like use her arms to like keep her balance because that's just not an automatic process anymore, Her cerebellum isn't receiving proprioceptive and somatosensory input and information from the frontal lobes any longer, and is no longer able to synthesize that information into a nice coordinated, smooth, accurate movement any longer. And thus, the act of walking, which we've all probably taken for granted throughout our life, is now very difficult for this person. Same thing with writing, Here's normal, just like a scribble across the paper, but somebody with cerebellar damage is going to have like shaky movements because they're not getting that feedback, Their frontal cortex and cerebellum aren't working together in concert to give you that same feedback anymore and get a nice smooth movement. So, and just like we talked about earlier with the spinocerebellum, how the midline of it is more for trunk movements and whole body movements, and the more lateral portions of the spinocerebellum, the portion in the center, is more for lateral movements, more for proximal movements of your hands and your feet, things like that. Or sorry, more distal, not proximal movements. Damage to the midline is going to cause impairment of whole body movements, walking, sitting up, things like that. Damage to the lateral portions of it is going to cause more difficulty with finer movements, finer motor movements, writing, picking things up with your fingers, things like that. So that's that. We're going to go over a little summary real quick, but first, I see you guys took out Muse Tavish, Scottish Fold Highlander, which means this little sleepy fat boy gets a treat. And y'all get some kitty cam. Thank you guys for donating again to Fat Boy's Fat Belly Fund, dedicated to keeping him the fattest kitty on Twitch. He appreciates it, I appreciate it, y'all love it. It's a win-win-win. A good boy. Christian Ninja says, does this type of damage affect proprioception overall? It might. I would say that you're still going to be able to know where your body is in space, but when you go to move it, you're not going to be able to control that movement as you would like to. So you'll be able to know where your body is. You're not going to have the overall deficits in proprioception like people that have dorsal root damage in their spine, where like they can't feel where their body is anymore and they have to actively look at things or actively tense their muscles to keep their body still. You wouldn't have that kind of thing. It's going to be more just controlling your movements, but your body would be under your control and you would know where it is for the most part. It's just the movements aren't going to be accurate, People with damage relying on their vision, they're probably going to rely on their vision to help do it. Yeah, because without being able to reliably see or reliably move their hand as they intend to, they'll likely supplement that by looking at what they're doing and focusing on it very intently. It's going to be a less automatic process after that, Just like we talked about before, people with damage to the dorsal roots and they don't have their sense of proprioception anymore. All those things like walking and sitting still, just being, that were all automatic processes taken care of by lower portions of your brain before. Now those become conscious processes, and you have to keep you have to be conscious of them at all times. So, got it? Good. Cool. I'm glad I was able to explain that for you. Neuropilot says, I heard in some cases patients with damage to the cerebellum, counter pressure suits help mobility. Ooh, I want to look at that. I've never heard of this. And by Professor Dava Newman. I want to look at those counter pressure suits. I'm guessing just from the name of that, it would likely have to do with as the suit feels you moving a certain way, it kind of pushes against you so that it keeps you from doing that, so that it kind of smooths out your motion. Am I right in that? Is that kind of the essentials of it? It sounds like it's going to help with that tremor by just giving you some kind of something to, essentially something for you to lean against at all times, or something to move against is going to keep you on track. If I had to guess, and I do because I don't know it. Something like that? Cool. That's what I thought. Well, I bet that's a godsend for people that can attain it, and I would also guess that many people can't attain it because it'd be a freaking nightmare for insurance companies. But I hope that people are able to get it if they need it. Alright, short summary. Then we're going to take our break like we normally do, and move into some Slay the Spire. Sorry, still just getting over the end of this cold. So I'm so done with it. I'm over it, but my body's not over it, you know? Anyways, there are different divisions of the cerebellum. The centralmost one's called the spinocerebellum. That's going to get all the tactile and proprioceptive feedback from your spinal cord and make use of that. There's the cerebrocerebellum, which is going to get in part of a continuous feedback loop, getting information from your frontal lobes and parietal lobes about what your body intends, or what your brain wants your body to do and how it feels at any point in time. And also going to project to the thalamus and then back up to the frontal lobes again to kind of make a feedback loop of here's what you want, here's where we are, and a constant kind of graphing of your movement so you can make fine adjustments along the way. Also the vestibular cerebellum, which is all involved in the vestibular system, basically making sure that we are at all times feeling and we are righted, we are feeling balanced, we have the correct posture, all that stuff. We're going to talk about that more tomorrow when we talk about balance. That's that. Thank you, Neuropilot. I will look at that later. Appreciate that whisper. However, if you guys mention things to me and I don't have a chance to look at them right now, whisper them to me. I'll look at them later. Whispering them to me, one, makes it so that I don't forget, and two, keeps it so I can actually find it later, because I can't scroll all the way back through chat and find these kind of things. You checking it out, Gerbo? Yeah. Oh, have you seen spoons that stay level for people with hand tremors? They have some sort of counterbalance in them? Oh, maybe like a gyroscope or something like that? That's really cool, Gerbo. I'm glad. That's not only cool because, one, I mean, that's just a cool device, but two, that does more than it sounds like it would. One, it makes it so that a person can feed themselves again. But two, it makes it so a person can feed themselves again, which is, when you lose that ability to do that, you don't know what you've lost till it's gone, or you don't know what you got till it's gone, you know? Losing the ability to feed yourself is a huge deal, and the ability to get that back with that special kind of utensil, awesome. That's amazing. Cool, Sage, I'd love to see those. Thank you. I appreciate that. Yes, you can always post those in the science section of the Discord, so everybody can see them, things like that. They don't all have to go straight to me. If you guys are members of our Discord, throw them in the science section. I'd love to see those kind of things. Absolutely, and I might not be the only person, so. I get you, no worries. All right, yes, within the cerebellum, within these different areas, there is this kind of basic circuitry between the different kinds of cells. Mossy fibers are the incoming fibers from the rest of the body and brain. Come into the cerebellum, synapse mainly with granule cells and also the deep cerebellar nuclei. Those granule cells go up and split off, their axons split off in what are called parallel fibers, which will interact with dendrites of Purkinje cells, another major type of cell within the cerebellum. Thank you for waiting for me during my word finding difficulty there. Purkinje cells also synapse directly with the deep cerebellar nuclei. The granule cells are primarily excitatory, same with the mossy fibers. Purkinje cells are going to be primarily inhibitory. And from there, those deep cerebellar nuclei project out to motor areas of the brain and things like that. Right? The inferior olive is involved in motor learning. It's kind of like the hippocampus, but for motor learning. The hippocampus, if you remember, helps us to form new episodic memories. The inferior olive helps us to learn new motor movements and remember them next time. For next time, it helps us to refine those kind of things. Okay? And then there are major input and output pathways, major highways of the cerebellum to the brainstem called peduncles. There's the superior peduncle, which is a major efferent or exiting pathway from the dentate nucleus, one of the 3 different types of deep cerebellar nuclei that is part of that, or one part of the corticopontine cerebellar pathway, that recurrent loop from the frontal lobes to the cerebrocerebellum, which helps us just to make those smooth motor movements. The middle peduncle is the incoming portion of that same pathway, and the inferior peduncle connects with the vestibular nuclei as part of the vestibular cerebellum, and we're going to talk about that more tomorrow when we talk about the sense of balance, or our balance, or the not so much the sense of balance, but also the little process of balance as well, right? And damage to the cerebellum causes a difficulty called ataxia, which can range in difficulties. It can cause an intention tremor, your hand or your body shakes a lot when you try to do something because you're not getting that same feedback from the frontal lobes anymore, from the corticopontocerebellar tract, so you're not getting those smooth motor movements any longer. It can cause you to overshoot or undershoot when you go to grab something. It can cause you to walk into walls and stuff like that because your gait's off. Cause all kinds of different stuff. Your vestibular system can be damaged, so you're gonna fall a lot, feel like you're falling, have trouble keeping balance. Just depends on where the damage is. So lots of different stuff that can happen with ataxia. And that's all I got to say about the cerebellum today.